Do no harm. Many organizations have used variations of this sentiment to direct their own efforts, though I prefer the simple iteration harm none, that lays down what should be held as the primary law of human existence in the shortest and easiest phrase possible. To elaborate, we need to take a step back from our current bureaucratic views of governance and ensure that the power given to our political leaders only extends to eliminating or reducing harm to the citizens and to the world that we live in. Beyond that, the individual would do well to heed this sentiment, to embrace it and express it in their lives. Most of us willingly do harm to others on a fairly frequent basis throughout our lives. I've personally been guilty of this at many junctures, and I struggle to stop. For my own life, it has never really been a matter of maliciously doing things that infringe on the liberties of others, but more a matter of verbal retaliation. It is important to remember that verbal abuse ultimately causes emotional damage, even to those whose actions are contemptible and whose personality may seem to lack virtue. That is a particularly disturbing social problem, one that arises first out of misunderstanding and lack of communication, and spreads to biased contempt for others, negative stereotyping, and ultimately racism and bigotry. It's easy enough to say, I'm nice to people unless they're cruel to me, but long gone are the days when we would stone our neighbor for stealing a sheep. Retaliation is only a short step from revenge, and revenge leads to a situation that rapidly spirals out of control, eventually resulting in deep hatred and warfare. We have to grow beyond this. Screaming at someone, yes, even on the anonymous internet, is basically a person's means of saying that they would strike you if it were seen as acceptable or possible. That is to say, on some level, you are striking someone, lashing out with your words and your tone, and ultimately you are damaging that person and damaging future human relations with your expression of anger. Violence, of course, is simply the ultimate expression of anger. There is a natural progression of events that stems from distrust, jealousy, misunderstanding, and other negative attitudes, and eventually leads to enslavement, exploitation, oppression, warfare, and genocide. Throughout all of known history, humankind has repeatedly followed similar chains of events in the development of empires, using similar tools to eliminate opposition and consolidate power. Very similar events are unfolding even today at various points in the process in many places of the world. We see it anywhere that experiences civil strife and civil war. We even see the darker motives of human greed and avarice in even more prosperous areas, including the United States. Everywhere we look, there is mistrust and anger. No part of the world is safe from the seeds of hatred, the ultimate progression that leads to human violence on a large scale. What it comes down to is that the individual will always be very responsible for this problem. It lies directly on you and me to conduct our daily lives in a way that does not inspire or compound feelings of anger, thoughts of retaliation, revenge, retribution. We, the people of the world, become the vehicles of a greater and deeper peace. Yes, we need to help the government. We need to support the government. But we must always remember that we do not need the interference of the government. It is our responsibility to produce a world to live in that is safe enough and harmonious enough that the people in executive power feel comfortable providing us the freedom to live as we see fit. When we let human relations degrade to the point that we are constantly hurting, murdering, and terrorizing one another, we develop a situation where the government feels compelled to overstep itself and behave in unconstitutional ways in an attempt to bring greater order to the people. The problem is that this leaves the door wide open for unscrupulous and ambitious people to manipulate circumstances for their own benefit. When you reduce liberties for the whole, you reduce civil rights and individual freedoms. There is a universal constant. The few and the privileged do not suffer the same loss of liberty. In any state in which human relations degrade to the point of marginalized liberties, they put themselves on the mercy of a privileged few who will retain their own rights, and in fact, through a subordination of the populace, they will always tend to increase their personal rights, over and above the people who are then subjugated. This merely serves to illustrate, on a grand scale, what happens in a world in which anger and hatred fester. It is simple doing harm to others, virtually ensures that they will do harm to you. Anyone who claims that they will shelter you from harm if you are willing to give up your liberties and freedoms is in fact guaranteeing you that they themselves will eventually be the ones to harm you and those whom you care about. Obviously, personal responsibility and striving to become a better person will not immediately shelter you from harm done by the hands of others. But again, not taking responsibility and not taking steps to change does ensure that you will continue to live in a world where many people are openly hostile and violent towards one another, and you can never know from one day to the next exactly how safe you and your way of life really are. Only through the gradual development of the individual and through the growth of the community can we overcome our human weakness and eventually find the will to stop harming others.